speed.
Okay, both cameras?
Uh-huh.
Okay, here, excuse me just a second.
Got it.
All right. So, yeah, thank you for being here and doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. And tell me about, how did you hear about the Kosher Kitchen?
Well, I was a college student at the time at University of Maryland in College Park. And I was going through a spiritual crisis for the past semester. This had to be, I would say, the autumn of 1974. And as a teenager, as a college student, this was early 70s, and I had been experimenting with LSD maybe 5 or 6 times. And this is kind of interesting, and let me tie this in, because the experience I had was not sort of this hippie trippy sort of thing. It was very much like Out of the Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, where for me it was like this deep, profound examination of my soul, and I realized that I had not really experienced, or I had sort of been alienated from my own Jewish identity. So I really wanted to begin to experience an authentic Jewish life. So in the autumn of 1974, I began to dabble with the Hasidic lifestyle. In College Park, Maryland, there was this small community of Chabad. This was the Lubavitch movement of Hasidism. And so I began to hang out with them. They taught me how to daven, how to pray the traditional Jewish prayers. For the first time, I really kept kosher, in a strict sort of way. I observed the Shabbat, the Sabbath, Jewish Sabbath, of no work, no turning on of lights, and it was a great education for one semester. But I realized that was not really resonating for me. So around, I would say about February or March of 1975, by that time the Kosher Kitchen had just opened. And I had heard about it. I was in the local Hillel house at University of Maryland. I walked in, and there was a sign on the door that, of music or entertainment, and some people were talking about, this Kosher Kitchen it was in the basement of an apartment building in White Oak, Maryland. So I thought I would go check it out. Now, at the same time, I was going through this Hasidic, experimentation. I was also studying sitar. Had been a music major for 2 years. Actually, I just changed my major to becoming an English teacher, and so I could play a couple of ragas, not many, but I said, okay, this sounds cool. I'll go there and maybe I'll see if I can play sitar there for exchange for a dinner. So and of course they said sure. Now, so I set up and playing sitar and I said, okay, this is kind of cool. And I began to learn more about this group of people. They were, young Jewish people who were interested in creating this. It was like really an alternative lifestyle, coming out of that hippiedom from the late 60s and early 70s. And it kind of resonated with me. I found out they were living kibbutz style and living together and working together, and their theme of being not just nonprofit but anti-profit sort of resonated with me. And it seemed for me was like it resonated so much more than what I had been experimenting with. At the same time, so I was doing this for about a month, and one time I was playing there was a guy washing pots and pans in the kitchen, and it was David Schnarr. Now, David Schnarr, of course, sings and plays guitar, and he had this little group called the Farbrengen Fiddlers. So David, after I had played and my sitar, David was talking to me and said, I play guitar. I said, oh, well, I also play bass fiddle, and which is was my main instrument. And when I was in college, I was actually playing in these different jazz trios. I played with one piano trio and one guitar trio, and I said, well, I do standards and stuff. And so one Saturday night, David and I got together at the Kosher Kitchen. He brought his guitar, I brought my bass. It sounded great. And next thing I knew, by the way, so as a sidebar from the Kosher Kitchen and your initial question, David invited me to play a couple of gigs with his band, and within a few months, I was invited to join the band, the Farbrengen Fiddlers. Now, that was 41 years ago, and I've never left the group. So I guess that worked out, that part. So the Kosher Kitchen was for at least a year, it was really a major hangout for me, even though I was not a member of the collective. And by the beginning of '76, I think is when I joined the collective. I became part of the group. They had by that time I think it's '76 or '77. The house had split up into two different households, and I joined one household. I was living with Ira Cohen, David Schneer, and Leora Khan was in one house, and the other collective members were in the other house. And it was really, just for me, it really it resonated on so many levels.
What exactly did you like about the Kosher Kitchen?
For me, there were so many aspects of the Kosher Kitchen that I really liked. I liked the fact that people were devoted to this cause that was really bigger than just running a restaurant. They were not just not-for-profit, they were anti-profit, and there was a social value to that. There was a sense that they were meeting needs of the Jewish community, and even a greater community that was not Jewish, with what they were doing, whether that was for social services and the Meals on Wheels, or creating alternative opportunities for learning about culture and literature. Folk dancing, was like one night a week, I forget what night it was dedicated for folk dancing. Saturday night, we'd always have music. By the way, let me stress, we never had trouble booking music at the Kosher Kitchen on a Saturday night. There were musicians lined up to play there, and they would play for free. This was because it was the sense of community, the sense of being part of something. And that, it was a very rare moment. And it's funny for me. I love to play music, obviously. And it took me a while to realize that doesn't happen everywhere. That sort of setting, that sort of devotion to being part of something. But there was there's also a sense of developing ourselves through the work of the kitchen, and developing ourselves could happen even as things as simple as the management self-criticism we would go through at the end of each day's shift, of looking at what we could do better and work better together. One of the things that always drove me crazy was there were times when there would be a conflict, and I said, well, let's just vote and resolve this. And no, we resolve things by consensus. And I wanted to move to a quick resolution, but sometimes the process would just draw out, and which I would often find maddening. But for me, it was a wonderful education on group dynamics. And I'll have to say that when I was working on my PhD several years later, there was a component in my PhD training focused on leadership of groups and organizational management. And this idea of what are the dynamics of a group was a critical component of that. And I actually brought this wonderful bit of history with my life that informed my studies in my PhD program, based from what I was doing in the Kosher Kitchen. So that was very cool. There was this other component, though, that would serve me at a different stage in my life as well. For the first time, I really saw the greater Washington Jewish community as an organism that I had never really appreciated before. I had grown up in Silver Spring, Maryland, in the Washington suburbs, and attended a synagogue from the conservative movement. And for me, going through Sunday school and Hebrew school up until my bar mitzvah. Getting bar mitzvah was almost a moment of liberation because that meant I wouldn't have to go to Sunday school anymore, and I was free. But I didn't really see the dynamics of a broader community beyond that. But suddenly with this kosher kitchen experience, I suddenly saw, the differences between Silver Spring and Rockville, the DC Jewish community, the Northern Virginia community, how organizations work. I began to understand the broader communal services such as the Jewish Social Services or the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, the funding organizations like the United Jewish Appeal Federation, and how all these groups and dynamics work together and the personalities involved within the Washington Jewish community. And that was very insightful because I began to see, all right, how could a group of young people who had set up a kibbutz-style collective in the basement of an apartment building and opening up the only kosher restaurant in the Washington, D.C. community. It was really, I began to see at a micro level and a macro level the communalism that I had never understood before. So it was a real interesting time for me.
It sounds like you learned a lot in that situation.
Well, let me add one thing, as I know you're going to have some more questions for me. So I had this bug of Jewish communalism in my ear now, and I was, I started off talking about this transition of search for spirituality and tying that spirituality to an authentic understanding of Judaism. This then branched into the kosher kitchen for me, and seeing at a macro level the Jewish community and how that related to expressing values in real ways of helping the people in need and so forth. So I had this Jewish communal bug in my ear. So within a couple of years, when I left the kosher kitchen, I went to become a teacher and got burnt out on that within a year and a half. And I landed at 1979. This was about the same year the kosher kitchen actually closed. I had been out of the collective by then. I became a writer and at that point, the assistant publisher for the Washington Jewish Week newspaper, which at that time was just called the Jewish Week. So it was a privately owned paper. We had a paid subscription of about 10,000 people. And everything I had learned from the kosher kitchen suddenly could be applied at this next level. Because the paper had some influence. Most of the embassies had paid subscriptions in the Washington area. We had a number of congressmen and senators who had subscriptions to their offices. So, the fellow who owned the paper, Joe Hochstein, had been the Washington newspaper bureau chief for the Newhouse newspaper chain. So he was a real journalist, and his goal was to really run the Jewish Week as a legitimate Fourth Estate newspaper for the Jewish community. So I eventually became managing editor of the Jewish Week during that time, and I was there for about a little over 4 years. But it was my experience at the Kosher Kitchen definitely informed and prepared me for my experience to become the managing editor of the Jewish Week.
What about a sense of identity? I mean, I've been talking to people who said that they were sort of trying to figure out where they fit in. I mean, you're young people at this time of your lives, and did the Kosher Kitchen help you to develop a sense of your own identity, the experience of working?
Well, yeah, my identity was developing as I transitioned to experimenting with religious rituals and seeking the purity of, in that case, the Chabad lifestyle, and but so I don't know if at that point my identity had evolved to where the Kosher Kitchen was going, or there was this very nice meeting of me and my Jewish identity and my identity as a human being with the Kosher Kitchen. But it all resonated, and this sense of community, both the internal community of the kibbutz, of the collective, the external relationship of that community with not just the Jewish community, but this broader community of food services and other food not-for-profits, and like such as the food co-op at College Park, as I recall, at the University of Maryland. It was, but also this whole sense of, and I think this probably came from people like Bill Dolnick, who is a social worker, and he was a social worker. I think he had finished his social work degree by that point. That informed our role to the greater Jewish community. So for me, it really was this wonderful merging of identity of, all right, I don't have to be ultra-religious to be Jewish, and I don't have to there's this cultural identity that I found comfort with through the Kosher Kitchen that allowed me to be to contribute in significant ways to the community. And I feel that not just what I did in the Kosher Kitchen, but later in my work with the Jewish Week newspaper, and also in my role as a folk musician with the Farbrengen Fiddlers, which has been a lifetime commitment. It has all really tied together. And my life experience 40 years ago with the Kosher Kitchen is all part of that fabric, that all part of that identity of music and communalism and identity. So it's integral to my identity, no question about it.
Do you think, now, someone might, from the outside, might look at the Kosher Kitchen and say, well, you guys were open for 3 years and then you closed your doors. So the restaurant was a failure. 3 years out, failure. Do you think the Kosher Kitchen was a failure?
It's funny. So was the Kosher Kitchen a failure? If one measures failure in terms of becoming a self-sustaining moment or self-sustaining organization, then sure, we failed. But for me personally, it was just the tonic I needed for discovering my identity and finding a way of expressing my spirituality and my membership in a community in a way that was positive and enduring and lifelong, and certainly in terms of my music and my other activities. I also come across regularly people who were part of this greater community of who would come, they'd come to the folk dancing on Wednesday nights or whatever night it was. They'd come to the music events on Saturday night. They would, at one point I was teaching a class there on Sunday morning. I forget what it was. It had nothing to do with literature because I was an English teacher at that time. But we were looking at Jewish literature, obviously. But I still run across people who were part of that community, and there's still this connection. And I'll see these people, they'll come out and, like, for example, this year, the Farbrengen Fiddlers played at the Washington Folk Festival in Glen Echo, and just, part of this greater community of folk music. It's nice to have that Jewish folk music there. And there were people there getting up and dancing to our music, and these were faces I recognized from the Kosher Kitchen days. And they're still coming out, and there's still that sense of yearning for community. And now the community's there, and community's existing. We're in the 21st century now, and things have moved on. But in so many ways, even though it only lasted 3 years, I would say the impact we had on the community was enduring. I'll say one more thing about that, because one of the things the Kosher Kitchen had sponsored in 1977 was they were one of the initial sponsors of the Washington Jewish Folk Festival. Folk Arts Festival, we call it, Jewish Folk Arts Festival. And it was originally held at American University. Sponsors were, I want to say, University of Maryland Hillel, American University Hillel, and Kosher Kitchen. I think those were the three sponsors. And that was another way the Kosher Kitchen left an imprint. And there was an explosion happening of Jewish folk arts, textiles, pottery, painting. and music, of course. And the Bringing Fiddlers, my group, was part of that. But the Kosher Kitchen was also a venue for the arts, and we displayed art in the restaurant, and we had the music, so it was all integral. So there was this enduring aspect to the Kosher Kitchen, even though the kitchen itself lasted only 3 years.
Great, it's a great answer. There are lots of nonprofit restaurants. I mean, a number of them across the United States now. What do you think about that? The fact that you were one of the first. Now there's really a lot.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. Now,
Okay, now if you could use part of my question in your answer, because my question won't be heard.
right. So there's been this emerging trend of not-for-profit restaurants. I'm pretty sure we were the first not-for-profit restaurant. Now, in our case, we were really obsessed with serving a community, being a voice for positive change in the community, and meeting needs that were not being met by the traditional establishment. These new not-for-profit restaurants have different visions. They have different roles. One of which could be something as simple as career development for people who are in need of learning trades and skills. So using these not-for-profit restaurants some of them use them for job training, teaching people how to cook, how to be a chef, how to even present themselves as waiters and waitresses in a restaurant and multitask in a restaurant setting. Then after these people get trained and after working in that environment, they move on to their jobs, to their careers. So on a certain level, it's that same vision. How do you transform the world into a better place? How do you complete the world? And which is a Jewish idea, the tikkun olam, I think it's called. It's this idea that we're part of creation, and through our acts, through our activities, we make the world more whole, more complete. And so I think, particularly with the new not-for-profit restaurants, this all makes a lot of sense, because it's a way of especially with doing career training, the job training, preparing people to improve the quality of their lives and improve the lives of the people around them. So, like the Kosher Kitchen, they're planting seeds, and this is a really, really positive thing.
Great. I just want to check on our time here.
We have 24 minutes left.
Okay, that's
And
good.
it is 12:48.
12:48. Okay. So, is there any question that I haven't asked you that I should ask you?
I don't know.
I mean, if you happen to, if there's something that you wanted to say that you didn't.
I think I said.
I mean, you said a lot of great stuff. So.
Yeah. So, and obviously you gotta put it together in a way that's coherent. Anything you want me to repeat?
No.
No, I was just wondering, do you need anything more about, I know some people have talked about the clientele a little bit, but maybe Theo has a
Sure.
story.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. Was the clientele at the Kosher Kitchen exclusively Jewish?
So the people who came into the Kosher Kitchen were largely Jewish community, and we saw, in a lot of cases, a lot of Orthodox Jews who had no other restaurant to go to. But it wasn't just the Orthodox. We found that there was a lot of young people would come, because it was an alternative to the Jewish establishment. College students coming from College Park or from American University or Georgetown, they'd come up to the Kosher Kitchen to get away from the Hillel House, or get away from whatever communal events they may have had on campus. It was an opportunity to be in a Jewish environment. So I remember the young people more than anything else. But it wasn't only Jewish, and we would have people from the building complex come down for a meal. We would have a a variety. And but by the way, we would also, when we'd have food, it would be we'd have an Italian night, we would have an Indian night, we would have different ethnic foods. I'm trying to think, do we ever have a Chinese night? We must have, but I don't remember. But it was we would have these variety of menus that would be served. So it was, and we would also have, we would connect out to different parts of the community. So it was a mixed crowd, but I would say it was mostly Jewish. But it was interesting because we would have secular Jews sitting next to the Orthodox Jews, and it was, and this was an unusual way of bringing people together. One of the features we had was this communal table in the middle of the room, this big long table, and people would sit there and they would talk to each other and they would engage in conversations, and it was a way for people to meet each other in a safe way. I heard somebody say the other night that when we were talking about the kosher kitchen, that that's now a common thing in restaurants. And it's so true. I was in a restaurant the other day that had a number of communal tables as well as tables for 2 or 3 people. And it's very evocative of what we were doing 40 years ago in the kosher kitchen. So that's kind of cool.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. I basically am done. I was going to give you a couple of script lines to read if you don't mind.
Oh, I'd be
This is not part of the documentary.